The static crackled through Technical Sergeant Matthias Kellgren's headphones like distant thunder on the morning of February 23, 1944, as he hunched over his radio equipment in a makeshift communications bunker 30 miles southeast of London. His fingers moved across the dials with the precision of a concert pianist, hunting for the faint transmission that had been haunting him for 3 sleepless nights. The signal appeared for exactly 47 seconds every morning at 06:15 hours, then vanished like smoke. Command had dismissed it as atmospheric interference. His commanding officer had ordered him to focus on established frequencies, but Kellgren knew better. Hidden beneath the layers of static was something that made his blood run cold. German voices, coordinates, and what sounded like aircraft preparation schedules. The morning fog hung heavy over the English countryside as he adjusted his equipment one final time, unaware that this particular transmission would contain information that would terrify him beyond anything he had intercepted during 18 months of signals intelligence work. What no one in the Royal Air Force Bomber Command knew that February morning was that one radio operator's refusal to follow direct orders would expose the most carefully guarded Luftwaffe secret in occupied Europe, leading to a raid that would cripple German fighter defenses just weeks before the Normandy invasion. Matthias Kellgren had grown up in the copper mining town of Ishpeming, Michigan, where the winter winds off Lake Superior taught a man to listen carefully to every sound the world made. The harsh winters that could end a man's life in minutes if he didn't pay attention to nature's warnings had shaped his character from an early age. His father, Niels Kellgren, had emigrated from Sweden in 1908, carrying nothing but calloused hands and an understanding that in America, persistence mattered more than privilege. The Kellgren family lived in a modest house on Pine Street, where Matthias learned to repair anything that broke, because replacement parts cost money they didn't have. The house smelled of pine tar and copper dust, and every evening after dinner, Niels would tell stories about the old country while teaching his son to work with his hands. As a young man, Matthias discovered an extraordinary talent for electronics and radio technology, building sophisticated radio receivers from scrap copper wire and discarded vacuum tubes. He would stay awake past midnight to catch distant broadcasts from Chicago and Detroit, surrounded by sketches of circuit diagrams and frequency calculations drawn on brown paper bags. The local radio repair shop hired Matthias as soon as he came of age, not because they needed help, but because he could hear problems in equipment that others couldn't detect. He possessed what his supervisor called radio intuition, an ability to sense the personality of electrical signals, to distinguish between normal interference and something more purposeful hiding beneath the noise. When customers brought in radios that seemed to work perfectly but sounded wrong somehow, Kellgren would spend hours listening to the subtle variations in tone and frequency until he identified problems that conventional testing couldn't reveal. His reputation as a radio technician spread throughout the Upper Peninsula, and by the time he reached his 20s, he was working as head technician for WJPD Radio in Ishpeming, earning more money than his father had ever seen from the copper mines. His expertise with radio technology had made him essential to maintaining civilian communication networks throughout the region, and he could have easily avoided military service by claiming essential worker status when America entered the war. When Pearl Harbor shattered America's isolation on December 7, 1941, Matthias was 22 years old and established as one of the most skilled radio technicians in northern Michigan. Despite his secure position and the option to remain in civilian service, he walked into the Army recruitment office in Marquette the morning after President Roosevelt's declaration of war, carrying a letter of recommendation from the Federal Communications Commission and a homemade radio receiver that could pick up signals from 800 miles away. The recruiting sergeant, Staff Sergeant Murphy, had seen plenty of young men eager to fight, but he had never encountered one who arrived with sophisticated electronic equipment and documentation from federal agencies. Kellgren's radio equipment impressed the technical evaluation team so much that they immediately recommended him for advanced communications training rather than standard infantry service. During the train ride to Fort Knox for basic training, he spent hours listening to radio broadcasts from across the continent, mentally cataloguing the subtle differences in transmission characteristics that identified different broadcasting stations and equipment types. He had no idea that this unusual skill would soon make him one of the most valuable intelligence assets in the European theatre of operations. Basic training at Fort Knox proved frustrating for a man accustomed to solving complex problems with delicate electronic equipment. Drill sergeants seemed more interested in how quickly he could disassemble a rifle than whether he understood the principles of radio wave propagation and signal analysis. But during advanced communications training at Fort Gordon, Georgia, his instructors recognized something extraordinary about his abilities. While other recruits struggled with basic Morse code, Kellgren was deciphering German radio protocols he'd never been taught. He could identify aircraft types by the subtle differences in their radio signatures, distinguish between authentic German transmissions and Allied deception broadcasts, and detect when enemy communications contained coded information disguised as routine administrative chatter. More remarkably, he could determine when German radio operators were using deception techniques, when frequencies had been slightly altered to confuse Allied interceptors, or when broadcast timing patterns suggested false information designed to mislead Allied intelligence services. His commanding officer at Fort Gordon, Major Duncan Rothschild, wrote in Kellgren's evaluation report, "This soldier possesses an almost supernatural ability to extract meaningful intelligence from radio communications that appear to be routine static to other operators. His intuitive understanding of signal characteristics exceeds anything achieved through conventional training methods. Recommend immediate assignment to Advanced Signals Intelligence with highest priority classification." The evaluation included detailed test results showing that Kellgren could identify German aircraft formations by analyzing radio coordination patterns, predict enemy movement by detecting changes in communication timing, and recognize deception operations that fooled experienced intelligence analysts. His ability to penetrate German radio security was so remarkable that intelligence officers began studying his methods to understand how he achieved results that conventional techniques couldn't match. By November 1942, Technical Sergeant Kellgren found himself aboard a troop transport bound for England, carrying specialized radio equipment and classified instructions that would place him at the center of the most crucial intelligence operation in the European theater. The Atlantic crossing took 12 days through submarine-infested waters, during which Kellgren spent most of his time below deck, maintaining communication equipment and intercepting German naval broadcasts that provided intelligence about U-boat positions and convoy hunting patterns. His ability to distinguish between authentic German naval communications and Allied deception broadcasts helped the convoy avoid 3 separate submarine attacks during the crossing. The ship's communication officer, Lieutenant Commander Harrison, wrote in his log, "Sergeant Kellgren's signal analysis prevented what could have been catastrophic losses to enemy submarine action. His methods for detecting German radio deception are unlike anything in current military doctrine." Upon arriving in Liverpool, Kellgren was immediately transported to a classified facility near London, where Royal Air Force intelligence specialists briefed him on German communication systems and the crucial importance of monitoring enemy Air Force coordination during the planned invasion of Europe. He learned that German fighter squadrons had become increasingly sophisticated about disguising their communications, using frequency hopping techniques, coded weather reports, and false transmission schedules to prevent Allied intelligence from tracking their movements and strength. The briefing officer, Wing Commander Pemberton, emphasized that success in the upcoming invasion depended absolutely on achieving air superiority, which required accurate intelligence about German fighter capabilities and positioning throughout occupied Europe. Kellgren's assignment would be to monitor German Air Force communications around the clock, identifying patterns that revealed enemy strength, location, and operational planning that could affect the success of the massive cross-channel assault being planned for the following year. By early 1944, Allied planners were finalizing Operation Overlord, the massive cross-channel invasion of Normandy scheduled for early summer. The operation would involve more than 150,000 Allied troops crossing the English Channel in the largest amphibious assault in military history, supported by thousands of aircraft, providing air cover and close support to ground forces, establishing beachheads on French soil. Success depended absolutely on achieving air superiority over the invasion beaches, which meant destroying or neutralizing every German fighter squadron within 200 miles of the French coast. German fighters operating from concealed or mobile airfields could devastate Allied bomber formations during the crucial hours when close air support would determine whether invasion forces could establish secure positions or would be driven back into the sea with catastrophic losses. Royal Air Force intelligence had identified 43 known Luftwaffe airfields in occupied France, Belgium, and the Netherlands through a combination of aerial reconnaissance, resistance fighter reports, and radio intercept operations conducted over the previous 2 years. Systematic bombing raids had damaged most of these installations, forcing the Germans to disperse their fighter squadrons among smaller, less convenient airstrips that were more difficult to supply and maintain with adequate fuel, ammunition, and replacement parts. Allied reconnaissance flights photographed every suspected German air installation twice weekly, with photo interpreters counting aircraft, analyzing runway conditions, and tracking the movement of fuel trucks, maintenance equipment, and personnel that indicated operational status and combat readiness. The intelligence picture appeared complete and encouraging from the perspective of Allied invasion planning. German fighter strength in northwestern Europe had been reduced to approximately 300 operational aircraft spread across known airfields that were regularly bombed and increasingly difficult to supply with the resources necessary for sustained combat operations. Allied air commanders felt confident that their fighter escorts would overwhelm any German resistance during the crucial first hours of the invasion, allowing bomber formations to provide uninterrupted close air support to ground forces during the vulnerable period when beachheads were being established and secured. Intelligence estimates suggested that German fighter opposition would be limited, disorganized, and operating from damaged airfields with inadequate logistical support and reduced operational capabilities. But what Allied intelligence didn't know was that German engineering teams had spent 18 months constructing the most sophisticated hidden airfield in military history, camouflaged so perfectly that it remained invisible to aerial reconnaissance, and operated under radio protocols so advanced that no Allied intelligence unit had detected its existence. The facility had been carved out of dense forest northwest of Amiens, with aircraft hangars constructed underground and runways concealed beneath removable camouflage netting that perfectly mimicked the surrounding woodland canopy from aerial observation. Supply tunnels connected the hidden base to legitimate-appearing farm buildings and logging operations that provided cover for fuel deliveries, ammunition storage, and personnel movements without attracting attention from Allied reconnaissance aircraft or resistance observers. The facility housed 140 of Germany's most experienced fighter pilots, flying the latest Messerschmitt Bf 109, Gustav, and Focke-Wulf 190 Anton aircraft, positioned specifically to intercept Allied bombing formations approaching the Normandy coast during the critical hours of the planned invasion. These pilots had been specially selected for their combat experience, navigation skills, and ability to operate independently without radio guidance, when circumstances required radio silence to maintain operational security. The secret base represented Germany's last realistic hope of maintaining air superiority during the critical hours when Allied invasion forces would be most vulnerable to coordinated air attack. German strategic planners understood that they lacked the ground forces and defensive resources to prevent an Allied invasion through conventional military resistance alone. But they believed that devastating air attacks during the initial hours of the assault could create sufficient casualties and confusion to force a withdrawal that would delay invasion planning for months or potentially years. The hidden fighter concentration was carefully coordinated with submarine forces, coastal artillery units, and mobile anti-aircraft installations to create an integrated defensive system designed to achieve maximum destruction during the brief but crucial window when Allied forces would be transitioning from sea transport to established beachhead positions on French soil. German intelligence had identified this transition period as the point of maximum vulnerability, when troops and equipment would be concentrated on beaches without adequate defensive positions, or comprehensive air cover from established bases. The success of this defensive strategy depended entirely on maintaining absolute secrecy about the hidden airfield until the precise moment when German fighters could achieve complete tactical surprise against unsuspecting Allied bomber formations. Radio communications from the concealed base were limited to essential coordination messages broadcast on frequencies that German intelligence believed were unmonitored by Allied intercept operations. These transmissions were carefully disguised as routine weather reports, supply status updates, and administrative messages that would appear meaningless to Allied intelligence analysts even if they were accidentally intercepted during routine monitoring operations. The German radio operators had been trained in sophisticated deception techniques designed to make their communications appear to originate from known installations rather than the concealed facility, using signal characteristics and timing patterns that would mislead Allied direction-finding equipment about the true source location of important operational information. Technical Sergeant Kellgren had been assigned to Station X-Ray, a signals intelligence facility housed in a converted Georgian manor house near Canterbury, where 12 radio operators worked around the clock, monitoring German military communications across occupied Europe. The facility occupied an elegant estate that had been requisitioned by the War Office, with sophisticated radio equipment installed in the former ballroom and multiple antenna arrays concealed throughout the landscaped grounds to avoid detection by German reconnaissance aircraft. His specific responsibility involved tracking Luftwaffe fighter squadron movements by analyzing flight coordination broadcasts, fuel status reports, maintenance scheduling transmissions, and pilot rotation communications that revealed the strength, location, and operational readiness of German air assets throughout the region. The work required extraordinary concentration and technical skill because German radio operators had become increasingly sophisticated about disguising meaningful military communications as routine administrative chatter that would appear harmless to Allied interceptors. A seemingly innocent weather report might actually contain coded aircraft readiness information. Maintenance schedules often concealed details about squadron relocations to alternate airfields, and supply requests frequently included coded references to combat mission planning and operational timing. Kellgren's unusual ability to detect these deception patterns made him the most productive intelligence gatherer at Station X-Ray. But it also made him a source of ongoing frustration for his superiors, who preferred operators who followed established procedures rather than pursuing intuitive hunches about suspicious transmissions that couldn't be verified through conventional analysis methods. His daily routine began at 0400 hours with comprehensive equipment checks and frequency calibration procedures, followed by 8 hours of intensive monitoring that required him to listen simultaneously to multiple German radio channels while mentally cataloging patterns, timing variations, and subtle changes in transmission characteristics that might indicate significant changes in enemy operations or strategic intentions. He had developed sophisticated techniques for detecting when German radio operators were reading from prepared scripts rather than engaging in spontaneous conversation, which often indicated that seemingly routine communications contained coded information of operational significance. He could identify individual German radio operators by distinctive voice characteristics and transmission habits, allowing him to track personnel movements between different installations and detect when experienced operators were replaced by less skilled personnel, which often preceded major operational changes or security modifications. More importantly, he had learned to recognize when German transmissions contained deliberate errors or timing variations that suggested the information was false or specifically designed to deceive Allied intelligence services about German capabilities and intentions. These specialized skills had made him invaluable to Allied intelligence operations throughout the European theater. But they had also created ongoing friction with commanding officers who worried that his unconventional methods might compromise operational security or violate established intelligence protocols that had been developed through years of experience. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Harrison Valdez, was a career military officer who had risen through administrative channels rather than field operations, and he viewed Kellgren's intuitive approach to intelligence gathering with suspicion and occasional open hostility. Valdez had repeatedly warned Kellgren about wasting valuable time and resources on ghost signals that led nowhere, emphasizing that standing orders required radio operators to focus exclusively on confirmed German military frequencies rather than chase mysterious transmissions that might originate from atmospheric interference, equipment malfunction, or sophisticated German deception operations, specifically designed to waste Allied intelligence resources. The lieutenant colonel had made it abundantly clear that he valued operators who followed established procedures and produced quantifiable results over those who pursued unverifiable hunches and spent hours investigating signals that couldn't be confirmed through conventional analysis methods approved by higher command. This fundamental philosophical difference had created ongoing tension between the two officers, with Valdez viewing Kellgren as a talented but undisciplined operator who needed constant supervision to prevent him from pursuing unauthorized investigations that violated established military protocol and chain of command procedures. But on February 20th, 1944, while monitoring routine Luftwaffe communications from known airfields near Calais using standard intercept procedures, Kellgren detected something that made his hands freeze over the radio dials and his blood run cold with the immediate implications of what he was hearing through his headphones. Hidden beneath a standard German weather broadcast was a faint secondary signal, so weak that it barely registered above background noise even with his equipment adjusted for maximum sensitivity and optimal reception conditions. The transmission lasted exactly 47 seconds, contained what sounded unmistakably like German voices discussing aircraft fuel quantities and maintenance schedules using authentic military terminology, and then vanished completely, as if it had never existed. When Kellgren attempted to relocate the mysterious signal on the same frequency using different antenna configurations and advanced signal processing techniques, he found nothing but empty static that showed absolutely no trace of the communication he had just intercepted. The technical quality of the transmission suggested that it originated from considerable distance and was being broadcast at minimum power levels specifically to avoid detection by Allied monitoring equipment, which indicated sophisticated operational security measures that exceeded anything he had encountered in 18 months of intercepting German communications. The voices had used authentic military terminology and aircraft designations that were completely consistent with genuine Luftwaffe radio procedures, but they had discussed operational details and logistics information that didn't correspond to any known German installations in the geographical region where signal strength measurements suggested the transmission had originated. Most puzzling and potentially alarming for Allied invasion planning, the conversation had included specific references to aircraft strength numbers and operational planning details that suggested a major German air asset existed in a location that Allied intelligence had thoroughly surveyed and photographed, without detecting any significant military installations. For 3 consecutive mornings, the mysterious transmission appeared at precisely 0615 hours on a frequency that should have been completely unused according to all known German radio protocols and comprehensive Allied intelligence assessments of enemy communication systems throughout occupied Europe. Each broadcast contained exactly the same format: precisely 47 seconds of faint German voices discussing what appeared to be routine aircraft maintenance and flight scheduling, followed by complete radio silence that lasted until the next scheduled transmission exactly 24 hours later. The mathematical precision of the timing suggested military discipline and sophisticated operational security procedures, while the consistent duration indicated that the transmissions were following carefully predetermined protocols rather than responding to spontaneous communication needs or operational requirements. Kellgren recorded each transmission on the highest quality magnetic wire available at Station X-ray, then spent hours playing them back repeatedly using advanced audio filters and amplification techniques that gradually allowed him to discern individual words and phrases from the German conversations, despite the weak signal strength and atmospheric interference. The painstaking analysis process required extraordinary patience and technical skill, as the original transmissions were so weak that individual words were often completely lost in background static and atmospheric interference that made accurate translation extremely difficult and time-consuming. As his analysis progressed over several weeks, the conversations revealed information that became increasingly alarming and strategically significant for Allied invasion planning. The German voices referenced aircraft designations he recognized from detailed intelligence briefings, specifically Messerschmitt Bf 109, Gustav variants, and Focke-Wulf 190 Anton models that represented the most advanced and capable fighter aircraft in the German Air Force, but they also included geographical location references that made absolutely no sense according to comprehensive Allied intelligence maps of known German military installations throughout occupied territory. The voices mentioned Waldgrün Base, using authentic German military designation protocols, but this installation name didn't correspond to any known Luftwaffe facility in extensive Allied intelligence files compiled over 2 years of intensive reconnaissance and monitoring operations. Even more concerning for Allied strategic planning, the intercepted conversations discussed supply deliveries scheduled for specific coordinates that placed them in heavily forested terrain between Rouen and Amiens, a region that detailed aerial reconnaissance photographs consistently showed as uninhabited woodland containing no structures larger than abandoned hunting cabins and deteriorating farm buildings. Most puzzling and potentially catastrophic for Operation Overlord planning, the transmissions included detailed aircraft count reports and pilot strength assessments that suggested a German fighter concentration significantly larger than any known airfield in northwestern France. The specific numbers being discussed in the intercepted conversations, including references to 137 operational aircraft and 164 qualified pilots, indicated a German air asset of unprecedented size that would fundamentally alter all Allied calculations about achieving air superiority during the critical hours of the planned invasion, if the intelligence proved accurate and actionable. When Kellgren brought his carefully compiled recordings and preliminary linguistic analysis to Lieutenant Colonel Valdez on February 26, 1944, the commanding officer's response was immediate, unambiguous, and professionally devastating for the sergeant's military career prospects. The lieutenant colonel's face darkened visibly as he reviewed the unauthorized investigation materials spread across his desk, and his voice carried the cold fury of a senior officer whose explicit authority had been deliberately challenged by a subordinate who had chosen to ignore direct orders and pursue forbidden activities. "Sergeant, you're chasing meaningless shadows again, despite my explicit and unambiguous instructions to discontinue this exact type of unauthorized investigation immediately. Those transmissions are either random atmospheric anomalies or sophisticated German deception broadcasts specifically designed to waste exactly the kind of time and resources you're spending on them. Your orders are to monitor confirmed German military frequencies using established procedures and approved methods, not pursue every piece of static that catches your attention or appeals to your overactive imagination. Consider this a direct order to discontinue this line of investigation immediately and permanently." The lieutenant colonel's tone and body language made it absolutely clear that he viewed Kellgren's persistent investigation as a deliberate personal challenge to his command authority, rather than a legitimate intelligence concern worthy of serious consideration, and that any continued pursuit of the ghost signals would be treated as willful insubordination, rather than dedication to duty and mission success. Any further deviation from your assigned monitoring duties will result in immediate disciplinary action that could include reduction in rank, transfer to non-technical infantry duties, or formal court-martial proceedings for willful disobedience of direct orders issued by a superior officer. This is your final warning, Sergeant. Follow your assigned procedures or face the consequences of your insubordination. But Technical Sergeant Kellgren possessed the kind of stubborn persistence inherited from generations of Swedish copper miners who had spent their entire working lives digging valuable ore from rock formations that looked completely worthless to untrained eyes, and his professional instincts told him with absolute certainty that these mysterious transmissions represented something far more important and strategically significant than atmospheric interference or routine German deception operations. He knew the fundamental difference between random static and purposeful human communication because he had spent years learning to recognize the subtle but distinctive characteristics that distinguished meaningful signals from natural background noise. He could distinguish between genuine German military terminology and the artificial language patterns that typically characterize deception broadcasts because he had successfully intercepted and analyzed hundreds of authentic Luftwaffe communications during 18 months of intensive signals intelligence work. More importantly, his professional judgment and technical expertise told him that these transmissions represented something operationally significant enough for the Germans to risk broadcasting on frequencies they believed were unmonitored by Allied intelligence services, which strongly suggested military importance that could directly affect Allied invasion planning and the success of Operation Overlord. Against direct orders from his commanding officer, and despite the absolute certainty that discovery would result in court-martial proceedings and potential imprisonment, Kellgren made a conscious decision that would either save thousands of Allied lives during the upcoming invasion or completely destroy his military career and personal freedom. He was going to pursue the ghost signals using every technical skill and analytical method at his disposal, and he was going to prove conclusively that Lieutenant Colonel Valdez was completely wrong about their significance and strategic importance. Against explicit direct orders and military regulations, Kellgren began using his off-duty hours to pursue the ghost signals with increasingly sophisticated technical techniques that pushed both his equipment capabilities and analytical skills far beyond anything he had attempted during his official monitoring duties. Working entirely alone in the radio facility during the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, when official monitoring duties were significantly reduced, and he could experiment with equipment modifications without attracting unwanted attention from his superiors or fellow operators, he carefully rigged additional antenna arrays to dramatically improve signal reception and constructed specialized frequency filters designed to isolate the mysterious transmissions from background interference and atmospheric noise. He developed comprehensive timing charts that precisely tracked the exact moments when the broadcasts occurred, correlating transmission schedules with weather conditions, atmospheric pressure changes, and solar radiation levels to determine whether natural phenomena could possibly explain the distinctive signal characteristics he was consistently observing. His detailed technical analysis revealed clear patterns that confirmed his initial suspicions and completely eliminated natural explanations for what he was intercepting night after night. The transmissions followed rigid military scheduling protocols that were far too precise and consistent to be accidental or naturally occurring, used authentic German aviation terminology that was too technical and operationally specific to be fabricated for deception broadcasts, and referenced complex logistical details that were too intricate and internally consistent to be meaningless static generated by atmospheric interference or equipment malfunction. More significantly, careful mathematical analysis of signal strength measurements and sophisticated direction-finding calculations indicated with high confidence that the broadcasts consistently originated from a fixed geographical location approximately 90 miles southeast of London, in a specific region of northern France that Allied intelligence had thoroughly surveyed and photographed without detecting any military installations larger than abandoned farm buildings and temporary logging camps. Using advanced triangulation techniques learned from civilian radio direction finding experience in Michigan, combined with sophisticated mathematical methods taught during his military communications training, Kellgren began plotting the precise source location of the mysterious transmissions with increasing accuracy and confidence. He positioned 3 separate antenna arrays at different strategic points around the station X-ray facility, carefully measured signal strength variations using precisely calibrated equipment, and calculated bearing angles that consistently intersected at a specific coordinate point in northern France. The complex calculations required many hours of advanced mathematics and repeated measurements to properly account for atmospheric conditions and equipment calibration variations. But the results remained remarkably consistent across multiple independent analysis sessions conducted over several weeks of intensive investigation. The ghost signals originated from a fixed point within a 2-square-mile area of dense woodland, approximately 15 miles northwest of Amiens, a region that appeared completely uninhabited and militarily insignificant on every Allied intelligence map and comprehensive aerial reconnaissance photograph. His next major challenge involved proving definitively that the intercepted transmissions contained genuine military intelligence of strategic significance rather than sophisticated German deception material specifically designed to waste Allied intelligence resources and mislead military analysts about actual German capabilities and strategic intentions. Working with German language skills, he had developed through intensive study during 18 months of intercepting authentic Luftwaffe communications, supplemented by comprehensive dictionaries and technical manuals obtained from classified intelligence archives. Kellgren painstakingly translated fragments of the recorded conversations, word by word with meticulous attention to detail. The translation process was significantly complicated by poor audio quality, regional dialect variations, and specialized military terminology that didn't appear in standard German dictionaries. But gradually he began to understand the specific content and strategic significance of what he was intercepting from the hidden German facility. The German voices consistently discussed specific aircraft serial numbers that precisely matched known Luftwaffe inventory management systems, detailed pilot rotation schedules that corresponded exactly to standard German Air Force personnel management procedures, comprehensive ammunition inventory reports that used authentic military accounting terminology, and complex fuel consumption calculations that accurately reflected actual operational requirements for the specific aircraft types being discussed in the conversations. More convincingly, from an intelligence verification standpoint, the intercepted conversations repeatedly referenced recent Allied bombing raids with remarkable accuracy in timing and targeting details that matched classified RAF mission reports, clearly indicating that the German facility possessed current and detailed intelligence about Allied operations that would be completely impossible to fabricate for deception purposes. On March 2, 1944, Kellgren's sophisticated monitoring equipment recorded a transmission that permanently removed any remaining doubt about the extraordinary significance of his discovery and the potentially catastrophic threat it represented to Allied invasion planning and the success of Operation Overlord. The German voices discussed comprehensive preparations for a major defensive operation scheduled specifically for the second week of June, involving precisely coordinated fighter attacks against Allied invasion forces during the critical initial hours of the cross-channel assault operations. They referenced specific beaches along the Normandy coast, using code names that exactly matched highly classified Allied planning documents, discussed detailed tactical procedures for intercepting Allied bomber formations before they could provide essential close air support to invasion forces, and coordinated precise timing with other German defensive installations, including coastal artillery units and submarine forces positioned throughout the region. The intercepted conversation included multiple references to operational planning at the highest levels of German military command, strongly suggesting that the hidden airfield was absolutely central to comprehensive defensive strategies that could potentially turn Operation Overlord into a complete catastrophic failure for Allied forces and the entire European liberation effort. Technical Sergeant Kellgren realized with growing alarm that he had uncovered Germany's most closely guarded military secret. The sophisticated hidden fighter base positioned perfectly to devastate the Normandy invasion and potentially alter the final outcome of the entire European war. Despite repeated official warnings from Lieutenant Colonel Valdez and the steadily growing risk of serious court-martial proceedings that could result in lengthy imprisonment, Kellgren continued his unauthorized investigation with increasing urgency as he began to fully understand the strategic implications of what he had discovered. Working entirely during off-duty hours using advanced techniques that clearly violated multiple military regulations about equipment use and intelligence-gathering procedures, he refined his triangulation calculations to pinpoint the exact geographical location of the hidden German facility with remarkable precision, accumulated dozens of hours of recorded German conversations that comprehensively documented operational planning and aircraft strength assessments, and assembled a detailed intelligence report that provided extensive evidence for the existence of what he had designated Waldgrün Base in his classified documentation. His carefully compiled evidence included precise coordinate locations calculated through multiple independent triangulation methods, comprehensive linguistic analysis of German conversations that conclusively proved their authenticity and strategic significance, detailed frequency and timing patterns that demonstrated sophisticated operational security measures, and accurate aircraft strength estimates based on fuel consumption reports, pilot rotation schedules, and maintenance activity levels extensively discussed in the intercepted communications. The hidden facility appeared to house between 120 and 160 fully operational fighter aircraft with experienced pilots and adequate supplies for sustained combat operations, making it by far the largest Luftwaffe concentration in northwestern Europe and a potentially decisive factor in German defensive planning that could determine the ultimate success or catastrophic failure of Operation Overlord. Kellgren's comprehensive intelligence report concluded with urgent recommendations that Allied Bomber Command immediately target the concealed airfield with maximum available force before German fighters could be dispersed to alternate locations or before sophisticated operational security measures could be modified to prevent further intelligence gathering about this critical threat to Allied. Invasion success. At 14:30 hours on March 9, 1944, Technical Sergeant Matthias Kellgren walked into Lieutenant Colonel Valdez's office carrying a thick manila folder containing 43 pages of detailed documentation, 17 hours of recorded German transmissions, comprehensive triangulation maps, and a formal intelligence report that would either save Operation Overlord from potential catastrophic failure or completely destroy his military career through court-martial proceedings that could result in lengthy imprisonment and permanent disgrace. Lieutenant Colonel Valdez's response confirmed Kellgren's worst fears about military bureaucracy, confronting unwelcome intelligence that contradicted established official assessments and challenged fundamental institutional procedures. But on March 15, 1944, Kellgren received an unexpected visitor who would change everything about his desperate situation. Squadron leader Archibald Forsyth of Royal Air Force Intelligence Division had carefully reviewed Kellgren's confiscated materials and immediately recognized their extraordinary potential significance despite the unauthorized circumstances of their acquisition. Forsyth possessed exactly the kind of analytical mind that consistently valued intelligence accuracy over strict military protocol, and his extensive experience with German communication systems had taught him to recognize authentic enemy intelligence when he encountered it, regardless of how that crucial information had been obtained. After reviewing Kellgren's comprehensive materials for 48 intensive hours, Forsyth arranged for the sergeant's temporary release from detention and immediate transportation to a secure Royal Air Force facility where specialized monitoring equipment could definitively verify the existence and authenticity of the ghost signal transmissions. At exactly 06:15 hours on March 19, 1944, the sophisticated monitoring equipment detected a faint signal on the precise frequency that Kellgren had specified, containing German voices discussing aircraft maintenance schedules exactly as he had predicted. Royal Air Force technical analysis confirmed that the transmissions originated from northern France, precisely matching Kellgren's triangulation calculations. By 1500 hours, RSF intelligence had reached a unanimous conclusion that Kellgren had indeed intercepted genuine German military communications from a previously unknown Luftwaffe installation. On March 22nd, Kellgren made a desperate decision that would either save thousands of Allied lives or result in his imprisonment for treason. Working closely with squadron leader Forsyth, he devised an audacious plan to force Allied recognition of the hidden threat by using captured German radio equipment to broadcast false messages that would trick the concealed airfield into revealing itself through responses that Allied intelligence could not ignore. On March 23rd, Kellgren began transmitting carefully crafted false German communications that represented either the most brilliant intelligence operation of the war or the most catastrophic violation of military protocol in Allied history. The response from the hidden German facility exceeded their most optimistic expectations. Within 6 hours, monitoring stations across southern England detected multiple German transmissions, revealing not just the airfield's existence, but comprehensive operational capabilities. The German responses included detailed aircraft inventory reports indicating 137 operational fighters, pilot strength summaries showing 164 qualified aviators, and coordination details revealing additional hidden installations in Belgium and the Netherlands. On March 25th, Squadron Leader Forsyth submitted a priority intelligence report revealing 3 hidden Luftwaffe installations with precise targeting coordinates. Within 18 hours, Bomber Command authorized Operation Woodland Strike with 216 bombers targeting the concealed facilities. The bombing results exceeded all expectations, eliminating approximately 60% of German fighter strength in northwestern Europe and exposing the most sophisticated camouflage operation in military history. Operation Overlord launched on June 6, 1944, with Allied air forces achieving complete superiority over the invasion beaches, partly because German fighter strength had been dramatically reduced by Operation Woodland Strike. The absence of effective German air opposition during the critical first hours allowed Allied bombers to provide unopposed close air support to ground forces establishing secure beachheads along the Normandy coast. After the European War ended in May 1945, Kellgren returned to Michigan with decorations and the private knowledge that he had fundamentally changed the course of military history through his willingness to disobey direct orders when following them would have cost thousands of Allied lives. He resumed his civilian work with WJPD radio in Ishpeming, eventually becoming chief engineer and developing innovative broadcasting techniques that improved communication throughout the region. He never spoke publicly about violating military orders or conducting unauthorized intelligence operations, maintaining the operational secrecy that protected both his military record and the reputations of officers who had ultimately supported his discoveries. Technical Sergeant Matthias Kellgren never called himself a hero, but his willingness to risk complete career destruction rather than allow preventable casualties established a lasting standard for moral courage that influenced military service long after the European conflict ended. His remarkable legacy reminds us that sometimes the greatest act of loyalty involves the moral strength to disobey orders that conscience and professional judgment clearly identify as wrong, and that one person's absolute refusal to accept convenient explanations can expose critical threats that conventional wisdom has completely failed to recognize. The ghost signals that haunted his radio equipment for exactly 47 seconds each morning represented far more than concealed German military communications. They embodied the persistent voice of conscience calling urgent attention to deadly dangers that others preferred to ignore for the sake of administrative convenience. His courageous decision to pursue those mysterious transmissions, despite explicit direct orders, achieved intelligence success that saved thousands of Allied lives and contributed decisively to victory in the 20th century's most important military conflict. Would you have pursued the ghost signals despite clear orders to ignore them? Risked complete career destruction to expose threats that superiors absolutely refused to acknowledge? Chosen moral responsibility over institutional obedience when thousands of lives depended entirely on your individual decision? Share this remarkable story so others remember exactly what genuine courage sounds like when it whispers through radio static at dawn, calling urgent attention to crucial truths that only persistent investigation can reveal.